Hey, so this is my second steampunk lamp build. I haven't finished my first one. It's still there, held up with a few complications that I haven't sorted out. So I was out garage sailing and I found two of these old Coleman lanterns. And I've got another one here that hasn't been touched. And then I also got a old antique blowtorch. But I stripped the paint off of this one, including off the decorative spindle there. And this is what we've got so far. I decided to use the same style of base as on the other one. This is just a smaller version. I took more time with this one and got a nicer finish on it. And gave the tank a bit of a polish. And because of the difficulty in wiring this when it's completed, I've made this, and normally this just threads on, so I took my Dremel and I sanded the threads off and it just pops on. So I drilled a hole and sunk this guy in, and then I built a little brass bracket here and soldered it between the two tubes, because otherwise this would just wiggle back and forth, which was no good. And I stuck another bolt in here to secure it. And then we took our copper fittings and some pipe and ran them. And actually this is just a reducer. My camera's not focusing. And the lamp thread nipples for your bulb sockets, they actually kind of hammered into this, and I didn't even have to solder it or nothing. It's in there and it ain't coming out. So this one's already threaded on, and it comes off. And so this top half is all ready for wiring. So my main bulb wires will come through this center pipe down into this copper pipe, and they come in and down into the tank. The bottom of the tank is not brass. I found that out after. It's actually steel, and it's fairly thick. It took me a while to cut out the bottom, and I just did it with the Dremel. These are, I'm guessing, either plates out of a transmission or a clutch. I'm really not sure. The holes are already in them, which was perfect. And I had some brass tube that actually fit into these holes, like just tight enough to secure them, which worked really well. And so I made my brass risers, and I had to kind of take my Dremel and sand them to fit the curvature of the tank, and that wasn't too bad. And then I just soldered them on again, and same soldering practices as in my first video, so nothing too fancy. I made sure that my tank, this can still open. It'll clear the plate. And I staggered the dowels, or the tubes. These ones are on the innermost holes, and these ones are on the outermost holes. And then I take just some solid core wire, copper wire from Home Depot. I strip it with one of these blades, and I just take it and strip it. And then I can bend it, and I find a pair of jeweler's pliers. This is an old pair. They're kind of worn out. They don't close properly. And I hold them with these pins, and then I can bend it that way, and it doesn't mar it up, and I can get some really nice tight bends out of it. And then I drill, I'll pre-bend my wire to the shape that I want. I'll cut it off, and then I'll hold it up to where I want it and mark my holes just with a fine Sharpie. and then I'll solder them all in. And we got our eBay voltmeter here. It's got it's an AC 300 volt voltmeter with a backlit. It's got an amber colored backlight. So I used my Dremel again, and it happened to have a fancy, I think it's a tile or drywall cutting bit, and it cut through the brass like cheese. I couldn't believe it. And I had a little difficulty. I had to shape this mounting surface to the curvature of the tank. Oh, sorry guys, my phone's camera's not focusing. There we go. And that was a little bit tricky, but I got a pretty snug fit. And then these were actually decorative hinges, and I cut them off the hinge part and then bent them. I clamped them in some vice grips and bent them to get a nice 90-degree bend, and then I just kind of curved them with my fingers to meet the curvature of the tank again, and then I soldered them on. I found it really difficult to get these to solder on nicely, mostly because of the thickness of this brass compared to this brass. The thin brass heats up way too fast, so the solder will flow onto it, no problem, but to get it to solder on to the heavier brass was a bit of a challenge. And then I've just got some small little wood screws to hold everything together onto the base. So this guy's going to have a tank here, a small tank that I'm going to build, and it's going to have some reducer fittings, 2 of them, and these vacuum tubes fit perfectly into them. So we'll run some LEDs out of them. I've still got some in my tray of goodies there in this back one. There's no light under here. Again, I'm just working on an old piano bench that I restored that needs to be finished. I never finished the top, so I'm not too worried about the surface, and I just work on it. It's got to be sanded down again anyways. And then my little pile of tools and some brass rod, whatever. And then I've got, this is all that's left of my brass clockwork plate. There's not a whole lot left. It's been chopped up and utilized pretty good. I've got my other half of my bulb sockets. I'm probably going to use some threaded bulb sockets, which I have to order online. These are cheap ones. They're like $7 from Home Depot, and they just line up with the teeth and you click them in. And these I just used for mock-up out of that one. And now I've got where my arms are going to sit. I'm going to use longer Edison bulbs, the tube style, and it'll kind of look like a banker's lamp when it's all said and done. So, and then too, I'm going to have a control box over here. I'm not sure if I'm going to make it out of brass or what. Might go wood. I'm not 100% sure yet, and that'll have all my switches and everything in it. And I'm debating still about using power indicator lights. I'm partial on it. I'd like to. I gotta figure out the wiring for it still. The hardest problem that I have with building these lamps is the wiring. How to hide it, how to route it, so that it stays hidden and everything works the way that it's supposed to. And then the second problem is anything that I build off onto this base that has electronics going into it. In order to wire this thing up, I've got to undo the 4 screws and lift this whole piece off of the base. So when I do that, if I've got copper pipe or whatever running and holding my wires, these pieces have to be able to disconnect. They have to come off. So that's the issue at hand, and I've been working out how to fix that. It's I think it's going to be pretty easy for this particular one. That one though, not so much. But I'm still designing the tank that's going to sit here, and it's going to probably be held up on some brass rod, and I'll cut some little legs off, probably like a centimeter or an inch or whatever to support it. And then these will go on top of the tank. I'll run 2 copper tubes, probably 1/4 inch, which is just really thin bendable stuff, and I'll run them into there and there, and then I might run another one off into the back. I decided not to go too crazy with the decorative wiring on the back. I might do some back here. I haven't decided yet, but I do want to bring in possibly a 1/4 inch line from the end of my tank and bring it down into here. So that's where it sits so far. And then too, I've got some brass gears out of the movement that I tore apart, and I'm probably going to bend this guy off. This is your fuel brightness or whatever for when you have the fabric mantles on this. There was a fuel regulator that normally goes into here, and I took that off. I don't know if I'm going to use it. I soldered this in for now. I was planning something different, and I've decided I can't get the fitting that I had seen in the store at one point, and it's no longer there. So plans have kind of changed. I'm deciding if I'm going to yank that guy out and thread that back in and just keep it how it is, or if I'm going to run this down over on top onto the top of my control box. Not sure, but it's coming along nice, and it's been a lot of work in progress. It's given me something to do while the other one is having some technical issues sorted out. And I hope whoever watches this likes it. I'm hoping to build a pair, and we'll see how it goes. Thanks for watching.